Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome back to Sci-fi Stories. Recently, YouTube has disabled our monetization features, leaving us without an operating budget to keep this channel alive. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting our team with just $1 so our creators can cover their living expenses and continue bringing these amazing adventures to you. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the description or the pinned comment below. The drop pod doors blew open, and the silence of orbit was instantly shattered by the shriek of a razor storm. This was Gliese 9 Ice, a frozen hellscape where crystal gales could flay a living creature to the bone in a matter of minutes. Bruce Best stepped out of the pod. He did not shiver. He did not run. He simply breathed in the freezing air, his mind already calculating the architecture of survival. The survival exam had officially begun. Thousands of alien cadets from across the galaxy were dropped simultaneously onto the unforgiving tundra. Through the howling winds, Bruce could see the frantic silhouettes of Pyrians and Krolls, species bred for war, giving in to pure primal panic. They were clawing at the permafrost, desperately trying to dig rudimentary burrows, or scrambling into the jagged shadows of ice dunes to search for faint traces of bioluminescent moss. Their instincts told them to hide from the cold. Bruce's intellect told him to conquer it. His inventory was intentionally pathetic. The examiners had stripped him down to the bare minimum allowed by galactic law. He wore a standard-issue thermal suit that felt thinner than paper against the biting chill. Clipped to his belt was a high-frequency vibroknife, a compact water filtration tube, and a miniature seismic scanner. That was it. No rations, no localized heating unit, no shelter beacon. The wind howled louder, carrying microscopic shards of ice that pinged off his protective visor like a swarm of angry metal insects. The ambient temperature was already plummeting toward fatal levels. Instead of seeking immediate cover like the frantic reptilian and avian cadets scattering in the distance, Bruce knelt on the exposed glacier. He unclipped the miniature seismometer, driving its sensory spike deep into the frost. He closed his eyes, tuning out the deafening roar of the storm, and watched the holographic waves ripple across the tiny screen on his wrist. He was not looking for a cave. He was not looking for a temporary windbreak. He was looking for a heartbeat within the planet itself. The planet was trying to kill him, but he knew that wherever there was extreme cold on the surface, there was often an equal and opposite force buried deep below. 15 minutes later, the scanner registered a massive anomaly. A deep, rhythmic vibration echoed beneath a massive crystalline fissure about 2 miles from his drop zone. The readings indicated a high-pressure geothermal groundwater system, boiling furiously far beneath the frozen crust. A grim smile touched his lips. The examiners had chosen a planet with active subterranean volcanism, assuming the surface cold would kill the cadets long before they could breach the crust. They had severely underestimated human engineering. Bruce trekked toward the fissure, his boots crunching methodically against the glass-like surface. The wind tore at his thermal suit, threatening to rip it at the seams, but he kept his breathing steady, conserving every ounce of kinetic energy. When he reached the jagged chasm, the true work began. Drawing his high-frequency vibroknife, he activated the blade. It hummed with a violent, unseen energy. He did not use it as a weapon against the elements. He used it as a masonry saw. He identified a thick deposit of black ice, a super-dense molecular variant of frozen water that was harder than steel and completely impervious to the abrasive crystal storms. With precise, calculated strikes, the vibrating blade sliced through the black ice, carving out massive, perfectly squared thermal blocks. Next, he harvested chunks of porous volcanic pumice scattered near the fissure's edge, hauling them back to his chosen site. Working with the tireless rhythm of a machine, Bruce began to build. He stacked the black ice blocks into a reinforced, aerodynamic dome, directly over a natural vent in the fissure. The shape would force the razor winds to glide harmlessly over the top. He lined the interior walls with the volcanic pumice, utilizing its porous nature to trap heat and create a perfect layer of insulation. By midnight of the first day, while other cadets were freezing to death in shallow, icy graves or desperately fighting over scraps of glowing moss, Bruce had sealed the final block of his dome. He cracked the icy seal of the vent below. Instantly, a geyser of trapped steam hissed upward, filling the dome chamber with thick, life-saving heat. He had tapped directly into the planet's boiling blood. By the morning of day 3, the storm outside had intensified to a catastrophic level. The external temperature sensors on the orbital monitoring station recorded a deadly -70 degrees Celsius. Any exposed biological tissue would snap freeze instantly. Inside the dome, however, the atmosphere was entirely different. Bruce Best was lying back in a naturally carved basin of warm, bubbling water, thick steam rolling off his shoulders. The ambient temperature inside his black ice sanctuary was a balmy 35 degrees Celsius. He let out a long, satisfied exhale, taking a piece of rough pumice stone and lazily scrubbing the tension out of his shoulders. On the edge of the geothermal vent, several pale, fleshy thermal mushrooms he had foraged from the deep crevices were roasting perfectly, releasing a rich, savory aroma into the humid air. He picked one up, took a bite, and leaned his head back against the smooth ice wall. High above the atmosphere, aboard the colossal orbital command station, the medical monitoring array was descending into chaos. Hundreds of warning lights flashed rhythmically across the sweeping holographic displays, signaling the critical conditions or outright deaths of cadets. Yet, on the central screen assigned to the human candidate, a glaring red anomaly blinked insistently. The chief medical officer stared at the biometric feed, his reptilian eyes wide with disbelief. The system was issuing an emergency alert, not because Bruce's vitals were failing, but because they were completely misaligned with the environmental parameters. His core temperature was optimal. His breathing was slow and rhythmic. His heart rate was so incredibly stable that the artificial intelligence flagged it as a system error. Bruce Best was not surviving. He was experiencing a state of deep, uninterrupted relaxation, while 1,000 warriors from 100 different worlds fought a losing battle against the icy apocalypse. The solitary human was enjoying a luxury spa day. On the night of the 5th day, the perimeter alarms of the Black Ice Dome chimed a soft, melodic tune. Bruce had rigged the warning system using hollowed pumice stones and a slight draft from the entrance. He put down his skewer of roasted geothermal mushrooms and stood up, outside. Dragging themselves through a brief lull in the razor storm were two pathetic silhouettes. One was a Pyrrhian, a proud avian species whose feathers usually burned with inextinguishable fire. Right now, that fire was reduced to a pathetic, sputtering ember on its broken left wing. The creature was practically a walking icicle. Beside the bird was a Kroll, a massive reptilian warrior covered in rock-hard scales. Those scales were currently coated in a thick layer of frost, making the terrifying gladiator look like a giant, miserable snow cone. They collapsed against the smooth exterior of the dome, drawn like dying moths to the faint, orange glow of the volcanic vent inside. They were minutes away from total cryogenic death. The ice door slid open. A blast of humid, 35-degree air hit them in the face. Standing in the doorway was a human, wearing only the bottom half of his thermal suit, holding a makeshift pumice stone mug of hot water. "Evening, gentlemen," Bruce said, his tone as casual as a hotel concierge. "Rough weather out there. Looking for a room." The Kroll managed a weak, rattling hiss. The Pyrrhian simply face-planted into the slush. Bruce sighed, grabbed them by their heavy collars, and dragged their frozen bodies inside, resealing the dome behind them. He dumped them unceremoniously near the edge of the boiling pool. He crushed some mineral-rich volcanic rocks, rubbed the powder into their frostbitten limbs, and shoved them into a shallow side pool where the water was a manageable 40 degrees. Life slowly returned to their eyes. The Pierian feathers hissed, producing a weak curl of smoke. The Kroll blinked its heavy, scaly eyelids, staring in absolute bewilderment at the human who was now casually filing his nails with a piece of volcanic glass. "By the ancestors," the Kroll rumbled, its voice like grinding stones. "You have conquered the death frost. You are a god of warmth." "I am an engineer," Bruce corrected without looking up. "And more importantly, I am a businessman. Which brings us to the terms of your stay." The two aliens stared blankly. They had expected death, or perhaps a brutal fight for resources. They had not expected a sales pitch. "You see, boys, this is a premium facility," Bruce continued, standing up and gesturing to the steaming cavern. "You are currently enjoying the basic recovery package: volcanic mineral rub, a 40-degree thermal soak, and temporary shelter from a storm that has a 100% fatality rate. But out here in the hospitality industry, nothing is free. Welcome to the Glacier Oasis Resort." The Pierian chirped in confusion. "Are we not brothers in the crucible of this exam? We must band together to survive." "Brotherhood does not pay for infrastructure expansion," Bruce replied smoothly. "Here is the deal. Scattered out there on the perimeter, right where the ice storm breaks, are blue core energy crystals. The planet spits them up when the weather clears for those brief 2-hour windows. You two are going to go out there and gather them. That is your entry fee. You bring me blue cores. You get to stay in the warm water. You refuse, and I toss you back out into the -70-degree blender. Questions?" The Kroll warrior, a being bred for honorable combat in the gladiatorial pits of his homeworld, looked at the bubbling hot spring, then looked at the frozen hellscape beyond the thick ice wall. Survival instinct easily crushed warrior pride. "Where do we sign?" the Kroll asked. Bruce grinned, pointing to a massive slab of black ice where he had meticulously carved a binding agreement. "Just press your thumb right there on the dotted line." Within 48 hours, the newly formed crystal economy was booming. The two aliens, motivated by the absolute terror of losing their spa privileges, proved to be excellent gatherers. With the blue cores they brought in, Bruce went to work. The crystals held immense, stable energetic properties. By jury-rigging his seismic scanner battery housing and his water filter, he built an automated thermal pumping system. He carved out 5 distinct new pools, routing the boiling water through different lengths of ambient ice channels to create highly specific temperature zones. He had a 50-degree scalding pool, specifically tuned for the Firebird, a humid mud bath for the Reptilian, and a lukewarm recovery tub for himself. He even repurposed a damp subterranean alcove, lined it with glowing, aromatic cave moss, and pumped pure steam into it, officially opening the first extraterrestrial herbal wet sauna. Meanwhile, 400 kilometers above the planet, the command deck of the orbital monitoring station was descending into a bureaucratic meltdown. A dozen high-ranking military examiners stood around the central holographic projection, shouting over one another. "This is an outrage," barked an examiner with 4 arms and a face like a squashed bat. "The Gliese 9 trial is designed to break the weak. It is a test of raw endurance, of suffering. This human is turning a Class 5 death world into a luxury resort." "He is exploiting the other cadets," another yelled. "He has reduced a proud Kroll warrior to a common errand boy." But sitting at the head of the table, the chief analyst remained remarkably calm, tracking the data streams. "Look at the vitals," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Cadet 309, the Pierian, and Cadet 714, the Kroll. Both were projected to die on Night 5. Their probability of survival was absolute zero. Now, their combat readiness is at 95%. Their tissue damage is completely healed. Because they are relaxing in a steam room, the four-armed examiner spat. Because this human has created a flawless, symbiotic survival loop, the analyst corrected. He is not just surviving the planet. He has gentrified it. He has created demand, established a currency, and built an ecosystem that keeps our confirmed casualties alive. It is utterly unorthodox, highly unethical by traditional military standards, and brilliantly effective. Down on the planet, Bruce sat back in his lukewarm pool, sipping filtered water, flavored with a hint of roasted moss. He watched the massive Kroll scrub the pool tiles just to pay for an extra hour in the sauna. Business was exceptionally good. By day 15, Glacier Oasis was no longer a makeshift survival shelter huddled over a crack in the ice. It had evolved into a thriving, bustling subterranean metropolis that completely defied the very laws of nature on Gliese 9 ice. The initial duo of desperate guests had multiplied exponentially as word of a magical warm sanctuary spread rapidly across the frozen wasteland. Over 40 cadets, representing 12 radically different star systems, now called the sprawling Black Ice Dome their permanent home. The brutal, desperate death matches over frozen scraps of protein were a thing of the ancient past. After all, why stab a competitor for a frozen, tasteless root when you could just pay a remarkably clever human to take a hot bath and eat a properly cooked meal? The atmosphere inside the dome was a bizarre mix of an exotic alien bazaar and a high-end luxury resort, filled with the constant sounds of splashing water, sizzling meat, and the loud, cheerful chatter of a dozen translated languages. Bruce had established a rigid, perfectly balanced economy to maintain absolute order among the diverse and highly lethal clientele. At the main entrance, carved into a colossal slab of polished ice, was the official pricing board. The rates were absolute and strictly non-negotiable. One blue core bought you exactly 1 hour in the herbal wet sauna. 3 blue cores earned a massive, steaming bowl of mineral mushroom and snow beast meat stew, cooked to absolute perfection over the boiling thermal vent. For the absolute elite among the cadets, 10 blue cores purchased the highly coveted VIP pass. This exclusive membership granted unlimited access to private sleeping quarters, furnished with custom-carved pumice stone beds and state-of-the-art underground radiant heating. To afford these unprecedented luxuries, the alien cadets had organically formed a highly efficient labor syndicate. They realized very quickly that pooling their natural biological talents was the only logical way to meet Bruce's steep prices. Species with immense physical strength, like the towering multi-armed Goliaths of Sector 4, spent their days enthusiastically smashing through the perimeter glacier, continuously expanding the resort's square footage under Bruce's precise architectural direction. The agile, multi-eyed hunters darted out across the tundra during brief lulls in the razor storm, tracking down the elusive, heavily muscled snow beasts to supply the bustling kitchen. Meanwhile, the few cold-resistant cadets dedicated themselves exclusively to scouring the hazardous outer ridges, harvesting the glowing blue cores necessary to fuel the human capitalist empire, never one to rest on his laurels. The human engineer continuously innovated his service offerings to extract maximum value from his guests. His latest and wildly popular addition was the physical therapy massage service. By compressing the natural geothermal steam through narrow volcanic tubes and rigging a complex series of pressure valves using discarded drop pod parts, he created powerful, high-pressure water jets. Wounded alien gladiators and exhausted hunters would line up for hours just to let the scalding streams pummel their sore muscles. "Hit the upper dorsal scales, human," a massive Kroll warrior grunted, leaning his heavily scarred back against the stone wall of the therapy pool. Bruce stood safely on a dry ledge, casually twisting a custom-built valve. That will be an extra half blue core for deep tissue pressure. Big guy. Standard company policy. The Kroll flicked a glowing blue shard onto the payment tray without a second of hesitation, groaning in pure bliss as the water pressure dramatically increased. It was a flawless masterpiece of alien biology meeting human spa ingenuity. High above in orbit, the command deck of the monitoring station was no longer just chaotic. It was teetering on the verge of a full-blown mutiny. The holographic feeds displayed a scene that utterly shattered every fundamental principle of military survival training. Bruce Best was not shivering in a dark cave. He was sitting on a carved pumice throne, wearing a tailored robe meticulously woven from dried thermal moss, casually sipping hot tea from a polished stone cup. Spread across his lap was a massive ledger made of flattened giant mushroom caps, where he was diligently doing his daily accounting, tallying his massive stockpile of crystal currency. Around him, some of the most terrifying alien warriors in the known galaxy were sweeping the ice floors, tending the stew pots, and fetching his tools, entirely voluntarily, just to earn a fractional discount on their next sauna session. General Zor, the supreme commander of the military faction and the chief examiner, stood paralyzed in front of the primary monitor. He slammed his massive, gauntleted fist onto the control console, instantly cracking the reinforced glass into a spiderweb of fractures, his deeply scarred face contorted in pure, unadulterated rage. This fragile, unarmored human was making an absolute mockery of the galaxy's most elite proving ground. The exam was supposed to forge unbreakable weapons of war, not enthusiastic hospitality staff. "Enough of this absolute nonsense," Zor growled, his voice vibrating dangerously through the abruptly silent command deck. "This is a survival trial, not a vacation retreat for the weak-minded. If the harsh elements of this miserable rock will not break him, we will introduce a variable that absolutely will." He shoved the frantic duty officer aside, violently bypassed the standard environmental controls, and accessed the highly restricted biological armory protocols. With a series of rapid, furious keystrokes, General Zor authorized the immediate deployment of an Apex Predator pack directly to Bruce's coordinates. Within seconds, a heavily armored drop pod detached from the station. Inside were 12 six-legged ice wolves, bioengineered hunting machines with razor-sharp mandibles, acidic saliva, and an insatiable hunger for living flesh. The pod hurtled toward the glacier oasis like a furious meteor. The relaxing vacation was officially about to end. The drop pod carrying the six-legged ice wolves slammed into the frozen tundra just outside the perimeter of Glacier Oasis, sending up a massive plume of shattered frost. These were the apex predators of the sector, bioengineered nightmares armed with acidic saliva and razor-sharp mandibles capable of crushing solid titanium. Up in orbit, General Zor leaned closer to his monitor, eagerly awaiting the bloody massacre that would finally break the arrogant human. As the pod doors hissed open, the beasts charged the black ice dome, howling with a terrifying bloodlust. They never even made it to the outer wall. Bruce had anticipated physical breaches from desperate competitors. He had carefully linked several unstable blue cores to the underground geyser network, creating a deadly perimeter of pressure plate steam mines. The moment the lead wolf stepped on a disguised pumice stone, the permafrost shattered. A geyser of superheated steam erupted from the ground with the force of a bomb, instantly boiling the entire pack alive in a cloud of blinding white vapor. The terrifying assault was over in less than 10 seconds. By dinner time, the grand dining hall of Glacier Oasis had proudly introduced a premium menu item: hickory-smoked wolf flank. Naturally, Bruce immediately increased the daily lodging fees by 20% due to the sudden influx of high-quality protein. But the comedic triumph of the Great Wolf Barbecue was short-lived. A subtle, creeping dread began to infiltrate the resort. replacing the cheerful chatter with nervous murmurs. It started on the morning of day 22. Bruce was standing inside the main storage cavern, auditing the massive hoard of blue core crystals his guests had collected. When he noticed the sound, it was not the usual erratic hum of trapped energy. It was a heavy, rhythmic, low-frequency thrum that vibrated through the soles of his boots. He placed his bare hand against the largest crystal formation. It was vibrating violently. He moved to the next one, then the next. Every single crystal in the vault was pulsing in perfect, synchronized resonance. It sounded exactly like a colossal, slow-beating heart echoing from the dark depths of the planet. A sudden, panicked shout from the central bathing chamber snapped his attention away. He sprinted out of the vault to find a dozen battle-hardened alien cadets backing away from the primary hot spring in sheer terror. The previously crystal-clear water had turned a thick, opaque crimson. It looked exactly like boiling blood, emitting a foul, metallic odor of ozone and iron. Worse, the ambient temperature inside the dome was skyrocketing uncontrollably. The impenetrable black ice walls, which had easily withstood the apocalyptic razor storms for 3 weeks, were now groaning under immense thermal stress, weeping thick streams of meltwater. Deep, jagged cracks shot across the stone floor like lightning bolts as the permafrost itself began to warp and buckle upward. "Evacuate the main pool immediately," Bruce ordered, his voice cutting sharply through the rising panic of the guests. He did not wait for them to comply. Stripping off his heavy thermal robe, he grabbed his waterproof tactical flashlight and dived directly into the scalding, crimson water. He swam downward into the dark chasm, fighting against the sudden, violent surges of heat welling up from the abyss. He needed to inspect the geothermal vent to see if the planetary crust was collapsing. As he reached the bottom of the flooded cavern, he shone the concentrated beam into the gaping, subterranean fissure. What he saw defied every known law of planetary geology. The walls of the deep fissure were not made of jagged volcanic rock or shifting tectonic plates. They were smooth, fleshy, and rhythmically expanding. Massive, translucent veins, thicker than starship engines, snaked along the glowing red walls, pumping a highly viscous, bioluminescent fluid. The intense heat warming his resort was not coming from a magma chamber. It was biological body heat. The entire frozen planet was not a geological formation at all. It was a colossal, cosmic incubator. Glisa, 9 ice was merely the frozen shell of a star leviathan, an ancient entity of pure cosmic destruction. And the unimaginable creature inside was waking up. Bruce kicked violently off the fleshy wall, swimming frantically back to the surface. He breached the red water, gasping for air, his brilliant mind racing through the horrific implications. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with terrifying clarity. The orbital command station holding the military examiners was the trigger. It was constantly transmitting high-frequency electromagnetic scans to monitor the thousands of cadets on the surface. Those invisible waves were penetrating the deep ice, acting as a massive, irritating alarm clock for the sleeping abomination. And the glowing blue cores? They were not geological anomalies or precious gems. They were the planet's localized immune response. Biological antibodies pushed to the surface by the Leviathan to fight off the orbital irritation. "Attention all guests!" Bruce yelled, hauling his soaking wet body out of the red water and slamming his fist onto the resort's central acoustic alarm button. The relaxed, mercantile facade was entirely gone, replaced instantly by the cold, commanding tone of a man facing down absolute extinction. "The planetary surface is about to shatter. The primary vent is experiencing total structural failure. I am declaring an emergency evacuation of the upper levels." The towering Kroll warrior stepped forward, his scaly face twisted in confusion and fear. "Evacuate where human? And what about our crystal deposits?" Bruce grabbed his thermal suit, his eyes locked on the groaning, dripping ice ceiling that was threatening to cave in at any second. "We are moving everything to the sub-basement bunker I carved out yesterday, and you are going to carry the crystals. Every single one of them. The VIP lounge is now a mandatory labor camp. If we want to survive the next 24 hours, we need all the planetary antibodies we can get down there with us. Move." On the morning of day 28, the world finally broke. It did not begin with an earthquake, but with a sound that transcended biological hearing. A subharmonic frequency vibrated through the deep bedrock beneath the frost, causing the very molecules of the freezing air to ache and hum. Then, the immense ice shelf spanning the entire northern hemisphere shattered in a single, devastating instant. Billions of tons of jagged, super-dense permafrost were violently hurled into the darkened stratosphere, blocking out the faint light of the distant sun. The frozen planet of Gliese ice was cracking open like a fragile eggshell. The star Leviathan was stretching its cosmic limbs, and its violent awakening was an extinction-level event. In the cold vacuum of space, 400 miles above the disintegrating surface, the military command station experienced the immediate, terrifying backlash of the enormous creature's shifting mass. The Leviathan's sudden movement generated a localized gravity anomaly, a massive, swirling vortex of distorted space-time that reached up from the planet like an invisible, crushing hand. Inside the command center, General Zor was standing by the primary console, aggressively lecturing a junior officer about strict military protocol, when the artificial gravity plating on the massive deck abruptly short-circuited. Emergency alarms screamed across a dozen different octaves. The colossal monitoring station, a multi-billion-credit marvel of military engineering, was violently ripped from its stable, geostationary orbit. It was instantly pulled downward, locked into a catastrophic freefall, toward the boiling atmosphere of the dying world below. They plummeted through the chaotic razor storms like a burning, doomed meteor. The heavy outer hull plating tore away in massive chunks, and structural integrity alarms blared relentlessly as the intense friction of atmospheric entry burned the exterior defense arrays to absolute ash. With a deafening, metallic screech that tore through the howling winds, the towering orbital fortress slammed headfirst into the frozen tundra. The sheer force of the impact carved a crater spanning over 2 miles across the glacier, tossing up a tidal wave of shattered ice, dirt, and searing plasma. When the screeching, groaning metal finally ground to a halt, the state-of-the-art station was entirely dead. The primary fusion reactors were offline. The emergency thermal generators were hopelessly crushed beneath collapsed bulkheads. The sophisticated communications arrays were pulverized into useless dust. Hundreds of the galaxy's most decorated, arrogant military examiners were suddenly trapped in a dark, rapidly freezing tomb less than 2 miles away from the subterranean location of Glacier Oasis. Their invincible, untouchable fortress had instantly become a frigid metal coffin. Back on the shattered surface, the true horror was just emerging from the abyss. Through the massive continental fissures, glowing, fleshy tendrils the size of mountain ranges burst upward, illuminating the deadly blizzards with an apocalyptic, pulsating blue light. The Leviathan finally breached the crust and unleashed an ultrasonic roar, a shockwave of concentrated acoustic energy that violently rippled across the planetary surface. It was not a conventional physical weapon, but a devastating wave of absolute molecular destruction designed to clear the planet of parasites. Out on the frozen, exposed wastes, the hundreds of alien cadets who had scoffed at Bruce's capitalist sanctuary desperately slammed their frozen hands onto their emergency extraction beacons. High-tech, military-grade energy shields flared to life all across the tundra, forming brilliant golden domes over the terrified, shivering warriors. They prayed for the automatic rescue shuttles to descend, but against an ancient entity born in the infinite void of deep space. Mortal technology was a tragic, useless joke. The devastating ultrasonic wave slammed into the energy shields, and the protective barriers shattered instantly, popping like brittle glass bubbles in a hurricane. Every single natural ridge, ice dune, and artificial structure on the unprotected surface was instantly pulverized into fine, white powder, leaving absolutely nothing behind. But deep beneath the chaotic surface, inside the heavily reinforced sub-basement bunker of the glacier oasis, the raging apocalypse was reduced to a dull, distant thud. Bruce Best stood perfectly still in the center of the underground chamber, his arms casually crossed over his chest, watching the green diagnostic lights on his makeshift control panel blink rhythmically. He had not spent the past few weeks merely hoarding wealth for the sake of greed. He had spent it engineering absolute salvation. Using the thousands of glowing blue core crystals his exhausted guests had diligently gathered to pay for their luxurious spa treatments and hot meals. He had constructed an architectural and scientific masterpiece. He arranged the highly charged planetary antibodies into a massive, complex geometric lattice that fully encased the walls, floor, and ceiling of the underground bunker. By wiring the energetic crystals together, using salvaged copper cables ripped from old drop pods, he had created a colossal Faraday cage that perfectly neutralized the Leviathan's intense electromagnetic interference. But he did not stop there. Bruce had used his seismic scanner to calculate the exact frequency of the creature's acoustic attacks. He then manipulated the energy flow of the blue cores, synchronizing them to vibrate at a precise inverse resonance. He had essentially built a massive, planetary-scale noise-canceling headphone system for his entire resort. The apocalyptic ultrasonic wave washed over the subterranean glacier oasis and simply dissolved into harmless static. Inside the bunker, over 40 terrifying alien warriors, beings who were accustomed to charging fearlessly into glorious galactic battles, were huddled together in absolute, stunned awe. The massive crawl warrior was clutching a glowing piece of pumice stone tightly to his scaly chest, while the proud Pierian bird folded its healed wings, staring at the human engineer with a level of reverence usually reserved for ancient deities. They were completely insulated from the destruction, completely safe from the crushing pressure, and remarkably warm. The brutal survival exam had turned into an extinction event, and the only safe haven in the entire sector was owned by a human contractor. Suddenly, on Bruce's primary console, the only piece of communication equipment still functioning on the entire ruined planet began to hum with a frantic, static-laced audio feed. His jury-rigged antenna was catching short-range, unencrypted distress signals broadcasting from the smoking wreckage of the orbital station 2 miles away. The audio fed directly through the bunker's speakers, filling the quiet, warm room with the sound of desperate, shivering, and terrified voices. "Mayday! Mayday! This is General Zor." The trembling voice crackled over the speaker, stripped of all its former arrogant authority. "Command station is completely destroyed. We have catastrophic hull breaches across all primary decks. All thermal heating units are dead. We are freezing rapidly. The surrounding temperature is dropping below -70 degrees. The creature is right outside our wreckage. Can anyone hear us? Please, we need immediate extraction. We are going to die down here." The proud masters of the grueling survival trial were now the ones hopelessly begging for their lives. Outside, the Leviathan was turning its massive, blind, glowing gaze toward the smoking wreckage of the station, drawn to the dying heat of its crushed engines. Inside the cozy, crystal-lit bunker, Bruce Best simply adjusted the comfortable collar of his thermal suit, took a slow sip of his hot moss tea, and calmly picked up the microphone. "General Zor, The previously undisputed master of the Galactic Military Academy was now reduced to a crawling, pathetic animal. His pristine, heavily metalled uniform was shredded to ribbons by the relentless freezing winds. Behind him, a ragged trail of surviving examiners dragged their broken bodies across the jagged, pulverized ice. The ambient temperature was plummeting past -80 degrees, and the deafening, bone-crushing roars of the star Leviathan shook the very air in their lungs. Every step across that agonizing 2-mile stretch from their downed cruiser to the humans' subterranean bunker was a battle against absolute freezing death. They finally reached the outer perimeter of the glacier oasis. Zor threw his heavy, frostbitten body against the reinforced, transparent, black ice window of the sub-basement airlock. His eyes widened in sheer, desperate disbelief. Inside, completely untouched by the cosmic apocalypse tearing the planet apart, the human cadet was casually leaning against a carved stone counter. Bruce Best was entirely unharmed, perfectly warm, and holding a steaming cup of tea. Behind him, dozens of alien cadets were relaxing in comfortable pumice stone loungers, completely insulated from the sonic destruction outside. Zor slammed his bloody, gauntleted fists against the impenetrable glass. He screamed into his wrist communicator, syncing to the bunker's localized frequency. "Cadet Best, open this blast door immediately. This is a direct order from the Supreme High Command. Let us in before that abomination vaporizes us." Inside the warm bunker, Bruce slowly set down his stone cup. He tapped a single button on his jury-rigged control console, opening a narrow, static-free audio channel to the outside. He offered a polite, incredibly sharp smile through the reinforced ice. "Welcome to Glacier Oasis, General," Bruce announced, his voice smooth and entirely devoid of panic. "It is an absolute pleasure to have the examination board visit our humble establishment. However, current capacity has reached its absolute maximum limit. To expand the energy shield and accommodate your party, I am going to need to collect a mandatory premium surcharge." Outside, the Leviathan let out another earth-shattering bellow. A massive, fleshy tendril whipped through the storm, obliterating a nearby mountain range. Zor spat blood onto the freezing ice, his face contorting in pure, unadulterated outrage. "A surcharge? Are you completely insane?" Zor roared into his communicator. "I am your commanding officer. I am the head of the military tribunal. You will open this door immediately, or I will have you court-martialed and executed for high treason the moment a rescue fleet arrives." Bruce did not even blink. He calmly picked up a digital datapad he had salvaged from the initial drop pod wreckage. "I am afraid that is factually incorrect, General. According to the Galactic Survival Exam Rulebook, Section 4, Paragraph 9, and I quote, cadets have absolute discretion over the use of all structures and resources they organically create during the trial period. No exceptions. This bunker is my intellectual and physical property. You are not my commanding officer right now. You are an uninvited loiterer on private real estate." The ground beneath Zor's boots violently buckled as the Leviathan began to turn its glowing, blind gaze toward the tiny, surviving life forms. The examiners behind Zor began to openly weep, begging their supreme commander to do whatever the human wanted. The ultimate power dynamic of the galaxy had just completely inverted. "What do you want?" Zor gasped, his military pride utterly broken by the crushing weight of impending doom. "Name your price, human." Bruce tapped a few commands into his console, projecting a glowing holographic contract through the ice, right in front of Zor's face. "The terms are simple. First, you will immediately transfer the Supreme Access codes for the automated orbital rescue fleet to my personal terminal. Second, you will sign this legally binding deed, granting me permanent, unconditional ownership of Gliza 9 Ice, including all subterranean biological assets. Specifically, The giant, angry pet currently destroying the neighborhood. Sign it, and you get to live. Jor stared at the digital document. It was the most ruthless, perfectly executed capitalist maneuver he had ever witnessed in his centuries of military service. With trembling, frostbitten fingers, the Supreme Commander pressed his biometric thumbprint onto the holographic scanner. The transfer was complete. "Pleasure doing business with you." Bruce smiled. The heavy, black ice blast doors hissed open, dragging the shivering, defeated examiners into the warm, life-saving sanctuary. The moment the doors sealed shut, Bruce sprang into frantic action. "All right, everyone, activate the Super VIP protocol." He ran to the edge of the deep geothermal vent, located at the back of the bunker. Beside it sat the massive, glittering hoard of blue core crystals his alien guests had spent nearly a month collecting. Bruce grabbed the heavy release lever he had engineered and pulled it down with all his might. The entire floor tilted. Thousands upon thousands of highly charged, glowing blue planetary antibodies cascaded downward, pouring directly into the throat of the boiling subterranean abyss. They hit the Leviathan's exposed biological mantle all at once. The chain reaction was instantaneous and blinding. But it was not an explosion. Bruce had precisely calculated the energetic frequency required to counteract the creature's waking cycle. The massive influx of concentrated blue core energy created a colossal, planetary-scale biorhythmic pulse. It was a cosmic lullaby. The violent, ultrasonic roars abruptly ceased, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that vibrated gently through the stone floors. The blinding, red glow of the creature's veins slowly dimmed back to a cool, dormant blue. The massive tentacles retreated beneath the crust, and the super-dense permafrost immediately began to rapidly freeze over the gaping continental fissures. The star Leviathan, overwhelmed by the massive dose of planetary antibodies, simply closed its eyes and sank back into a deep, heavy slumber that would last for tens of thousands of years. The chaotic razor storms instantly died down. The sky cleared, revealing a blanket of calm, glittering stars. Above them, utilizing the supreme access codes Bruce had just acquired, a massive fleet of automated galactic rescue ships broke through the atmosphere, descending gracefully toward the coordinates of Glacier Oasis. The heavy ice ceiling of the bunker was carefully breached by the rescue teams. As the golden sunlight hit the subterranean floor for the first time, Bruce Best walked up the boarding ramp of the flagship. He was not a traumatized survivor. He held a thick stack of legally binding contracts in his hand. He had saved the lives of every single cadet and the entire examination board, effortlessly passing the deadliest trial in history with a perfect score. More importantly, he had just become the most powerful, undisputed real estate billionaire in the entire galaxy. And he had done it all in exactly 30 days. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Wonderful listeners. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this cosmic adventure and want to help keep Sci-Fi stories alive, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can scan the QR code right here on the screen, or click the donation link in the description or the pinned comment. Your incredible generosity helps us pay our hardworking staff, support their families, and ensures we can keep creating even more thrilling sci-fi tales for you. Thank you, and see you in the next adventure.